Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes' Godbreaker. The man who rules the world takes on the Asgardian god of thunder in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes' Godbreaker in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Over the July 4th weekend, there was a surprise hit at the box office. And while movies like Indiana Jones, The Little Mermaid, and The Flash were failing at the box office, this independent film, The Sound of Freedom, opened to a $45 million opening. Now, The Sound of Freedom was made for only $14.5 million, and in its opening weekend managed to make $45 million, basically having the film pull a profit in its opening weekend. And when I look at the success of The Sound of Freedom, it basically shows me that there's possibly a paradigm shift as related to entertainment here in America, similar to what I've read about in the year of 1967 when the late Tom Laughlin made the film Born Losers. Now, back in 1967, we had America in the middle of a lot of turmoil with the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War, and many baby boomers were not really interested in going to the movies, where Hollywood executives who were at the time were going out here making a lot of epic movies, World War II films, and musicals, and these films were not resonating with many of those young people who saw a completely different world out their window from the protest of the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, and all of the turmoil going on in the streets from a lot of the riots that went on. And because those kids did not see their issues being presented on screen, this is why Hollywood was struggling and many of the studios were on the brink of bankruptcy. And at the time, Tom Laughlin, a small independent filmmaker with his wife, went out here and made the film Born Losers, which was about a Native American man, Billy Jack, who was taking on a biker gang in a town that had been overrun by these bikers. And this film basically went on to become a surprise hit in 1967. And as Tom Laughlin made this film and distributed it to theaters himself, what he did was create the first blockbuster. And blockbuster meant that people were waiting around the block to go see this movie, and as they waited around the block to go see this movie, it basically meant that it showed the world that there was an audience for movies, but they had to be movies that spoke to people at the time. And Born Losers went on to become, again, one of the biggest hits of 1967 because it resonated with audiences, and I see a similar trend as related to this film, Sound of Freedom. And Sound of Freedom, like Born Losers in 1967, is a small budgeted independent film that in one weekend went on to become one of the biggest hits of 2023, showing us that the audience just needs to see a film that they can go out here and get behind. And with The Sound of Freedom, it basically proves a point that I had made just this year, that there are people who want to see films about people, and that people are tired of seeing movies about superheroes. They want to see movies about real people, and they want to see a story that resonates with them. Now, you have some people say that The Sound of Freedom is a far-right movie, and they have a right to that opinion. However, the success of The Sound of Freedom shows me that there is an audience for movies, but the Hollywood movie studios sadly aren't listening, because like their predecessors in the 1960s, they are so detached and disconnected from the audience that they can't see that the audience wants a different kind of film. like the audience like the executives who came before them, they are still trying to go out here and produce content that the audience doesn't want because they have made big business deals and they're afraid of being embarrassed as related to those deals. But the problem is the audience is no longer interested in these kinds of movies, and that was shown to everyone with the success of The Sound of Freedom. Here is a film that basically shows us that you don't need a lot of money to make a great movie that resonates with audiences. No, as I've learned before from studying film history, it's usually small budget films that usually go on to become the big blockbusters, and what really just changes the trend usually are small budgeted, small independent films like Born Losers and like the late Melvin Van Peebles' Sweet Sweetback's Song. It was films like this that basically revolutionized film and got the entertainment industry out of a slump. It was small budgeted independent films that pulled the entertainment industry out of the hole. And sadly, what happened is these detached executives don't want that to happen, so they've been going out here trying to spin stories saying that The Sound of Freedom is some sort of far-right movie. But what they don't understand is if this is what the audience wants, then you have to give the audience what it wants, not what you want. And most people over the last couple of years have been saying they are tired of what they call this SJW or social justice narratives that have been pushed in movies like the Disney's Little Mermaid remake and other films like Turning Red. They have been telling people for the longest time that they don't want to see these kinds of movies, and that has been reflected in the box office. And as it's been reflected in the box office, many studio executives who are still, again, completely detached from reality want to try to tell the audience that there's something wrong with them for not liking their movies. But it's clear to me that from the success of The Sound of Freedom, that it's them not listening to the audience. And again, when I look at the success of The Sound of Freedom, it's really falling right in line with history with what happened with Born Losers and Sweet Sweetback, and showing a paradigm shift as related to the audience, and showing that the audience basically is picking the films that they want. But the whole issue here is that like back in the late 60s with the studios on the brink of bankruptcy, you've got detached individuals like Bob Iger and David Zaslav still trying to force their vision onto audiences with big budget superhero movies and big budget animated features and big budget action movies that the audience has basically burnt out on and wants to move on to something different. And that's where the opportunity lies for a lot of independent filmmakers. It lies for them because the theaters, who have already suffered huge losses as related to the pandemic, have an opportunity to start showing more independent films from independent production companies like the one that produced The Sound of Freedom. And those independent companies can go out here and gain some ground because with Hollywood's big studios on strike, talking with SAG and the WGA, this opens the door for those independent companies to start gaining some traction as related to getting some market share. This is what detached executives like Bob Iger and David Zaslav do not see. They don't see how they're basically opening the door for competitors to come in. They think that they've got it made, and because they've had so much success with superhero movies over the last 20 years, they are starting to take their audience for granted, making the same exact mistake that those executives did during the late 60s, where they thought people would continue to watch World War II epics, big-time epic movies and musicals for the next 20 years. But over the next 20 years, from the 70s to the 90s, film basically changed, and it changed because the audience wanted to see a different kind of film like Born Losers and Sweet Sweetback, which showed us a door open for other classics like The Godfather, Saturday Night Fever, Star Wars, and many other classic films. This is what opened the door to a just complete revolution, and that's what Sound of Freedom basically represents as I see it. I see it in the same way that I see Born Losers. I mean, Born Losers was a low-budget film which had some serious production flaws, but it resonated with people because the story of Billy Jack was one that people could connect with. It was one people could relate to, and he was a strong masculine hero who went out here and stood up for what was right, and that's why Born Losers went on to become the first blockbuster, followed by Sweet Sweetback by the late Melvin Van Peebles, and ushered in a revolution for film that basically knocked Hollywood on its ass and let Hollywood executives know that it is we the people who go out here and choose the content that we want to watch. And it's not some entertainment mogul who goes out here and tells us what to watch. No, these entertainment moguls are still stuck in the 80s, still trying to push 40-plus-year-old franchises like Indiana Jones on audiences, not understanding the audience's tastes have changed, and many of the Gen Xers like myself who grew up on Indiana Jones and Star Wars are getting to be near 50, and you're not thinking about the new audiences out there and the kind of films that they want to watch. That is the mistake that guys like Bob Iger and David Zaslav are making, that are allowing others to get opportunities to make inroads as related to taking more market share. Because again, with a currently bad situation in this SAG and WGA strike, what is happening is the door is opening for YouTubers to go out here and take market share. The door is opening for independent filmmakers like the producers of The Sound of Freedom to go in here and take market share. And theaters who have been suffering during the pandemic, they're going to want to take that content and put it on their screens, because with the studios, if they have a prolonged strike, they're not going to have any content to put on screen. So they're going to go over to these guys to go get fresh content, and that fresh content is going to open up doors at the box office because audiences want new content. They want new content they relate to. They want new content they identify with, and they're tired of the social justice agendas and the token diversity that the studios have been pushing. And this may be, again, the biggest paradigm shift since Born Losers, because nobody saw Born Losers coming back in 1967, and nobody saw Sound of Freedom coming. So when I look at Sound of Freedom, this could be, again, part of that paradigm shift where the audience basically lets these Hollywood executives know that we the people want different kinds of stories, and we're tired of the big budget superhero movies, and we want something different to watch, and we want to watch something about people just like you and me. Now, if you want to check out my screenplay all about Marilyn, you can find that screenplay on Amazon in paperback and Kindle format. And if you want to check out my screenplays for my TV series all about Nikki, you can find those on Amazon.com as well, along with my fantasy fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, like the Isis series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, and my vampire novel Eternal Night, and my sorority novel The Thetas. And if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can send a donation to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, 1987. Learn lessons about life and teenage love in the 1980s in this coming-of-age John Haynes story. Get your copy of John Haynes 1987 in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.